Hello and welcome to M152, Force Projection in Multi-Domain Operations. The purpose of this lesson is to help you understand the capabilities and limitations of force projection in multi-domain operations, or MDO. Most of your time in class will be dedicated to a small group practical exercise. You will be given time to prepare and brief your products. Here are your top 5 takeaways for M152. In the future, we expect force projection to be contested in conflicts across all domains: space, cyber, air, sea, and land. Force projection is an inherently joint operation comprising 8 interconnected planning processes. We'll talk about these 8 processes on the next slide. Your third takeaway is essentially about force tailoring, which FM 3-0 describes as the process of determining the right mix of forces and the sequence of their deployment in support of a joint force commander. Make sure to understand what the difference is between a tip fiddle and a tip fid. Force projection is a J3, G3-led operation. Within FM 3.0, you'll find that the movement and maneuver warfighting function includes tasks associated with force projection. LISCO, one of the Army's 4 strategic roles for the joint force, requires a whole-of-nation mobilization to deploy, employ, and sustain forces. Fulfilling policy objectives requires national-level leaders to orchestrate all instruments of national power throughout the entire government and coalition in a manner commensurate with national will. Force projection is the military component of power projection. Force projection is a race between friendly and enemy forces. The side that most rapidly builds combat power can seize the initiative. Thus, it is not the velocity of individual stages or transportation means that are decisive. It is a combat-ready force deployed to an operational area before an enemy is prepared to act or before the situation deteriorates further. Theater opening is the ability to establish and operate ports of debarkation, air, sea, and rail, to establish a distribution system and sustainment bases, and to facilitate port throughput for RSO&I. Force projection includes the processes of mobilization, deployment, employment, sustainment, and redeployment of forces. These processes are a continuous, overlapping, and repeating sequence of events throughout an operation. JRSO&I is a set of dynamic and complex activities involving numerous organizations requiring training, continuous coordination, and collaboration. The hexagon shown here is a model of the essential components of force projection. The hexagon-like 8 planning processes on the right are combined from several doctrinal references. We'll talk more about these topics in the slides that follow. You are already familiar with the strategic mobility triad. Strategic mobility incorporates sea lift, airlift, and pre-positioned stocks. Each of these requires significant joint interagency and intergovernmental coordination. In order to execute large-scale combat operations, DoD relies on the U.S. commercial airline and shipping industry, as well as the U.S. merchant marine, to provide capacity. This capacity is provided under several programs negotiated by the U.S. Department of Transportation under the Defense Production Act. TRANSCOM is the execution arm to activate the following capabilities: CRAF, or the Civil Reserve Air Fleet, RRF, the Ready Reserve Fleet, NDRF, the National Defense Reserve Fleet. As well, the U.S. shipping industry supports sea lift through VISA, or the Voluntary Intermodal Shipping Agreement, and the MSP, or Maritime Shipping Program. We'll review preposition stocks a little later. The purpose of this slide is to get you thinking about the strategic support area and risks to this space, also known as the SSA. Within the context of force projection, think about installations as platforms, or PPPs. That's power projection platforms. Certain installations are designated as power projection platforms. PPPs are Army installations that strategically deploy one or more BCTs. They are also capable of mobilizing and deploying high-priority Army Reserve component units. Located within the SSA, those installations designated as PPPs must establish and operate the infrastructure to assemble and process deploying units. This slide describes the roles of MCOM, AFSBs, and the Senior Mission Commander. The picture on the right side of this slide shows the various networks of highways, railways, and ports that support power projection. The Senior Mission Commander will routinely resolve installation issues with MCOM and other supporting commands. All applicable commands support the Senior Commander. The Senior Commander is the supported commander by the MCOM Region Director, the Garrison, and tenants. MCOM supports unit commanders in the conduct of pre-deployment activities. Through its installation transportation offices, MCOM plans and coordinates the movement of units from home station to ports of debarkation. It also provides capabilities to support unit deployment, redeployment, and reintegration. The AFSB's Logistics Readiness Centers serve as the primary Army Materiel Command interface to Army forces. The ITO is subordinate to the LRC. At CONUS installations, the ITO provides deployment guidance and supports units by assisting with the OEL and UDL, processing convoy clearances and special hauling permits, verifying strategic lift requirements, identifying and obtaining packing materials, containers, and pallets, coordinating for MHE, and coordinating airlift requests. This slide describes how the reserve component mobilizes and contributes to the total fight in LSCO. Mobilization Force Generation Installations, MFGIs, are Army installations including federally activated, state-operated installations designated to provide continuous reserve component power projection, combat preparation, post-mobilization training, sustainment capabilities, and pre-mobilization training support. Right now, only Fort Hood and Fort Bliss operate as MFGIs, which are optimized for steady-state rotational demands. However, these mobilization platforms are too few and woefully inadequate to support the volume and speed needed for a major theater of war contingency. 70% of the Army's sustainment capability is in the Reserve and National Guard. This capability is critical to set the theater, open the theater, sustain combat operations, and sustain force projection. You saw this slide, or one very much like it, during your S300 class. I threw it in, and the following slide, just for context. You are aware that there are other pre-positioning programs within the Department of Defense. Our focus here is on the Army's program, or APS. APS has both land and sea components. APS, the stocks, are designated as APS 1 through APS 5. Once again, this slide is from S300. Pre-positioning of stocks and potential theaters provides the capability to rapidly supply and resupply forces until air and sea lines of communication are established. Army pre-positioned stocks are located at or near the point of planned use or at other designated locations. This reduces the initial amount of strategic lift required for power projection to sustain warfighting until the line of communication with CONUS is established and industrial base surge capacity is achieved. Army Sustainment Command executes the APS program and provides accountability, storage, maintenance, and transfer of all equipment and stocks, except for medical supplies and subsistence items, which are managed by the U.S. Army Medical Materiel Agency and DLA, respectively. Take some time to refamiliarize yourself with the 5 APS categories and the capabilities provided by APS. This slide facilitates discussion on the command and control requirements of the force projection process. The global force management process drives and enables force projection. Upon activation of a plan or declaration of a crisis, an execute order, XORD, will be developed and published that informs the global campaign plan. Combatant commands will develop a request for forces document and submit through the Joint Requirements Capabilities Management tool. The Joint Operation Planning and Execution System, or JOPS, will then be used to develop the TIPFID and the Time-Phased Force Deployment List, or TIPFIDL. These documents collectively detail force requirements and force flow in a very detailed database. The TIPFIDL is found in Appendix 1 to Annex A of an O-Plan. It identifies the types and/or actual units required to support the O-Plan and indicates origin and ports of debarkation. The TIPFID contains non-unit cargo, personnel data, and movement data for the O-Plan or op order and supports the ongoing rotation of forces. The TIPFID contains the detailed data needed to conduct movement. Prior to class, your DisFM instructor will provide guidance on 2 reading assignments for your practical exercise. There's DIA's Russia Military Power Report for 2017 and The End of Sanctuary by Elvira Loreto. Depending on how your instructor decides to proceed, you will likely be required to analyze and prepare a briefing on the topics within one of these articles. Here is one way to conduct and present your analysis. Your DisFM instructor may provide additional guidance to help you prepare your briefings and identify challenges, determine risk mitigation measures, and develop a conceptual framework to enable force projection in support of future large-scale combat operations. The Russia article provides some insight into the former Soviet military's strategic capabilities and the manner in which the Russian military could operate in a major conventional conflict. You have the benefit of observing current events in Ukraine. Given recent events, you might further assess the impact of Russian theoretical perspectives, capabilities, and systems tested on the field of battle. The End of Sanctuary article presents concerns about an array of innovative and emerging threats. Your analysis might help describe the Army's approach to threat assessment and potential ways to mitigate these threats. Once again, here are your top 5 takeaways. Ultimately, the learning objectives for this class and subsequent lessons in this block enable you to summarize how to project the military instrument of national power from the United States in response to requirements for military operations and demonstrate the process of deploying a division from home station to a theater of operations in a multi-domain environment. Thank you.